Nazi experiments used to create biological warfare, or a deformed raccoon? You decide. Today we are talking about the Montauk Monster and Plum Island. Now, this is getting me ready to do some research on the Montauk Project, which is completely separate but equally terrifying. So, get comfortable, snuggle up your cat or dog. Let's get started. In 2008, an unknown creature washed up on the shore of Montauk, New York. Now, this was later called the Montauk Monster because it was unlike any animal or creature anyone's ever seen. It had a lot of different characteristics of different animals, but not specifically one type of animal. It was described as being a turtle without a shell, a giant rat. It had reptilian features, it had a beak. It just, nobody knew what this thing was. It had a lot of different body compositions and almost looked like it was completely genetically modified. Now, later, scientists and zoologists studied this animal and they realized that it was just a raccoon that floated up on shore and was deformed because it was sitting in water too long. So, end of story, right? Wrong. This small creature opened up the door for a malicious plot, corruption, and conspiracy theories. One small animal that washed up on shore could easily be swept under the rug. A lot of the locals had all the juicy gossip of what they thought it was, but eventually the talk probably would have died down and people would have forgotten about it and moved on. But when more creatures started washing up on shore, well, this created quite a stir. All the animals washing up on shore were equally as strange and different as the original one. Nobody knew what these things were and just weren't buying that they were all simply raccoons. In 2010, things got even worse when a human washed up on shore. This was a 6-foot black male that had some also very different characteristics. His hands were said to be deformed and he had abnormally long fingers. Now, externally, there were no wounds and nobody knew who this guy was or what happened to him. But after he was observed, they found 5 drill marks in his skull. A lot of people just couldn't shake this uneasy feeling, and some were saying that he was the product of a human experiment gone wrong. Now, who this guy was and what these creatures were a complete mystery, but nobody questioned exactly where they were coming from. There is a small island off of New York called Plum Island. Now, this is not found on a lot of maps and it is not easily accessed to humans and kind of cut off from the public. Plum Island is used as a research facility for the study of foreign diseases in livestock. It is the only facility in the entire country authorized to work with live samples of foot and mouth disease. At the height of the Cold War, the study of biological weapons against livestock was conducted at this facility. Later on, President Nixon said that this was completely uncivil, it was dangerous, and he just really wanted to shut the program down. He didn't think it was right to continue to do these experiments. So that ended that chapter, right? It didn't, unfortunately. Experiments are still being conducted at this facility, and it's even going against the Geneva Convention. This remains incredibly controversial and it makes people feel unsafe. They're basically doing these studies on highly contagious diseases on livestock that is in such a close proximity to the metropolitan area. If the proper protocols weren't followed, it can contaminate millions of livestock and completely disrupt the food supply. It could even evolve into something that is contagious to people, making them incredibly sick. Now, you would pray that the task of being in charge of something so sensitive would be only given to really well trusted doctors or zoologists, and anybody in the staff would just be the highest level of safe. You would hope that it was not being run by a Nazi soldier that was responsible for killing thousands of people that reported directly to Hitler. Right? Right? Erich Traub was a German scientist and veterinarian that specialized in foot and mouth disease. He also specialized in how to spread diseases by biting insects like beetles or ticks. Now, he was drawn to this idea because he came up with the conclusion that if you were able to kind of get these ticks and insects and contaminate them with fatal diseases, you could secretly drop them on enemy territory and make your enemies incredibly sick and die and take out their food supply. Ticks were the perfect biological warfare because they are so tiny. You really don't know that they're on you until it's too late, and they are able to transmit diseases very easily. They're also really hard to kill, and they're really hard to kind of pick off your skin without completely infecting yourself. This is the perfect undetectable way to kill your enemies. Now, I could go on and talk about all the documented cases where the government uses viruses and biological warfare to make people sick and basically corrupt millions of people, but I don't have the stamina for a 36-hour video. However, I can take you to Lyme, Connecticut. In 1975, a huge population in Lyme, Connecticut of people started getting sick. They started having body aches, fevers, they were breaking out in this bullseye rash, they were feeling incredibly unwell, even having a hard time breathing. Doctors didn't think it was the flu, and they really had no idea what was going on. It left some people paralyzed and delusional and had long lasting effects. 2 years later, scientists discovered that these people were indeed infected by a disease that were carried by ticks, and that is where Lyme disease got its name from. The scientist for discovering Lyme disease was William Bergdorfer. Bergdorfer. I could be saying that right, but I'm probably not. Now, we could commend William for his really well done job on researching Lyme disease and figuring out just how it came to be. If he wasn't a researcher on Plum Island trying to figure out how to spread warfare using ticks. Now, it's pretty convenient that the man who discovered Lyme disease was potentially the one who was responsible for creating it. So, how does this happen? Well, in 1969, 300,000 infected ticks went missing from Plum Island. Poof, gone. Nobody knows what happened to them. Now, among these 300,000 ticks that were kind of rogue and escaped, there was a species of tick called the Lone Star tick. These things are absolutely terrifying. They have the nickname the zombie tick because regular ticks will just kind of bite you once, embed on your skin. They'll just brush up against you while you're walking in the woods and attach. Where Lone Star ticks, they crave blood. They will come looking for you because they can smell your sweat in the air. These things will bite you repeatedly, and they cannot be killed. They cannot freeze. They cannot be squished. They are absolutely terrifying. They also hang out in hordes. So there's thousands of them that just lump together. And if you come across this, you are in so much trouble. Now, these things also are responsible for creating an allergy in the people that they bite that makes them allergic to the protein that is found in red meat. So basically, you are a vegan after being bitten by these things, which I don't hate, but also I don't love either. Now, thousands of these ticks were released in Virginia, but they did not stay there. They traveled far and wide and can pretty much be found anywhere now, which is, I hate it. I hate it so much. Now, in 1978, foot and mouth disease also found its way to kind of spread on Plum Island. You would think that something that is responsible for such incredibly contagious diseases, it would be just impossible for anything to get out. But when the USDA inspected this island, they found absolutely deplorable conditions. This island is not just responsible for ticks and livestock, but they also contain mosquitoes. These mosquitoes are infected with something called the Rift virus. The Rift virus presents as flu-like symptoms, but if you don't treat it immediately and get it taken care of, it can become fatal. Now you have to ask yourself if this island that is responsible for basically trying to figure out how diseases travel and make people sick, are they intentionally letting these things go under the radar and potentially get off the island, or is it just simply gross neglect? Now, you can breathe a breath of relief because Plum Island is set to close in New York very soon. However, they are not closing it permanently. They are just moving it. They are moving it to Kansas City. You know, the middle of the country responsible for the largest production of livestock for human consumption with incredibly windy in a windy environment that could easily spread things airborne. It sounds so great. Now, if you Google the Montauk monster, you will find that it is just a bunch of raccoons that drowned in the ocean. But if you deep dive, you will find that there are reputable people like zoologists and researchers that say absolutely not. There are characteristics of this animal that are not raccoon, and they will fight it and dispute that this is a raccoon to the end. Now, I don't think it's a raccoon, and after reading about Plum Island, it sounds like there's some pretty malicious things going on there. I'm not sure what the best case scenario is, that there are these undiscovered monsters roaming that we don't know what they're capable of, or that the government is kind of releasing these animals, potentially making us all incredibly sick. I want to know what you guys think. Do you think it is just simply a raccoon, or do you think that there's definitely something else to the Montauk monsters? So next week I probably am going to talk about true crime. So if there is one particular case that you guys are hoping I talk about, let me know. Let me know your thoughts on today's stories. And I appreciate you so much for watching this video. I love you. You matter. And I will see you next time. Bye.